Welcome to Straddle the Threshold, a class with Shiloh Sophia. This class was recorded in February 2021 before a live virtual audience and has been edited for your viewing pleasure. Get your pen and your paper and a cup of something good, and let's meet the muse.
It's so good to see you. Where have you been? Oh my gosh, can you believe everything that we've been going through? I don't know about you, but I'm just like ready to have a cup of tea with the muse and just hang out in some alchemical creative space. Do you want to do that with me? Oh, good. I'm just so glad to see you. Let's all just take a big, beautiful breath that we arrived here in this sacred moment to have some cafe, to have a little time with the muse groove, to just tune in to another place, a different place, a place between places, a space between spaces, a journey in between where you've been and where you're going. It's an in-between space. Maybe you've heard about it. Before we get into all that, I just want to know, today, in this moment together, if we were sitting across from each other, perhaps in a little snow-covered mountaintop cafe or chalet, or perhaps we're in Paris having some rosé. Maybe we're at the top of the mountain of Musea. Maybe we're just sitting in your studio. So I invite you to just imagine, what little cafe am I meeting you in today? Go ahead and just close your eyes and tune in as you imagine your own little cafe. And I am there with you, creating a sense of place for this story to unfold. Where are you? Design it in your mind. Let it be revealed. What is the setting? What time of day is it? What is the table like that we're sitting at? What kind of tea or coffee or vino are you drinking? What are you choosing? Go ahead and order it up if you don't have it already. Just place an order. See everything about this moment. Create a sense of place, an imaginary space where we are having cafe. Imagine it, feel it, be in it. Allow yourself to remain grounded in your physical studio space where you are, while also traveling into the in-between, in the cafe, between tomorrow and today. Do you see it? Just nod your head if you see your cafe. And maybe you want to share with us a little bit about where you are. What is it like where you are? What is your beverage? What is the table like? And how does it feel? Because it has been such a long time since I've seen you. Oh gosh, it's so good to be with you. So just allow yourself to feel that sense of arriving. Every place you've been, just allow yourself to arrive as fully and presently as you can in this moment. With all of us from around the whole world, straddling the threshold between your studio where you are, and even if you're in your kitchen or in your car, today it's your studio for your muse. That you're straddling the reality of like where you're actually sitting and experiencing this, and this alchemical imagination place called the cafe. And this is the first invitation in intentional creativity. Is this an invitation to cafe? Cafe comes from an experience with my own teacher, Sue Hoya Sellers, when she was a young artist and didn't have an art studio. And she would take her journal, which she called a notebook because it was for taking notes to add to a painting or a sculpture. She'd bring her notebook to the cafe. And the cafe in the United States that she went to was called Denny's. Maybe you've heard of it. Have you had a moon over my hammy or a pancake stack at Denny's? So she would go to Denny's, those little white cups with the brown flecks, and for a quarter, she could sit at a 6-person booth all day with her notes, and they'd fill her cup the whole day, and this was cafe. And this was her studio. This was her space. This was a place she could work, and she would tell stories about the kindness of all the waitresses who were making a space for that studio. And so wherever you are, I'm inviting you to let that be your studio and the cafe moment. It's a both and. It's imagination. And a place to work for an artist is essential, y'all. It is so essential. In the early women's movement, when we would talk about a room of one's own. But this room that we're talking about, the primary space, is the room which your imagination creates for you. So when Sue was working in her notebook, was she really at Denny's? Yes, she was in that logical world, but she was also in her notebook, in a mythical world. In essence, she was straddling the worlds. This, from a science perspective, is what we would talk about as being local and non-local, right? I'm locally here in this physical body at Musea in Sonoma, California, United States. That's like I'm locally here. And yet, I am mythically, non-locally, also at a cafe with you. That is the power and the realm of imagination, and it's chosen. We're choosing, and we're choosing to be in both worlds at once. That's a straddle. And you all do this all the time. You just might not have been spending a few hours exploring how it really works, things you can do there, ways you can amplify it, and how the increased awareness of intentional creativity actually shifts the experience of the straddle. Because when you know that's what you're doing, you draw information from both worlds. The worlds of the seen and the unseen, the worlds of the logical and the mythical. And everything is really like that, energy and matter. We are all on a kind of continuum. If you think of temperature, if it's all temperature, but there's hot and cold and there's in the middle, there's a straddling there. If you think of color, it's all color, but they're all spectrums within a color. And the color we can see is just the teeny tiniest percent of the actual array of colors. We're only seeing this visible spectrum. It's teeny tiny, and yet there's all the other colors. But gosh, we kind of get stuck in our ways, don't we? Thinking that the colors we can see are the colors, the whole spectrum, but it's not. It's not the whole spectrum. If you go beyond infrared and ultraviolet, there's an entire world, which is the majority of color that we do not see. What if beliefs are like that too? What if the way that you've been holding your experience of your life, your relationship with your creativity, your belief system about spirituality, about this world and the next, about the afterworld, the inner world, what if all the beliefs that you had were just one tiny slice of a very cosmic pie, but maybe you had been treating that piece of pie as if it was the whole pie? We've all done that at times. Especially when we're young and idealistic, we want to act like the piece is the whole, but it isn't. And when we start to grow up and evolve and have life experiences and heartbreaking experiences, we start to realize, oh my gosh, there's a whole other pie there, and I've been acting like this is the pie. I've been pointing to the pie. I've been telling people this is it, and it isn't it. And so in order to begin to get a glimpse of the rest of the pie, and the table it's sitting on at our cafe, And to be where I am and where you are and where all of you are at once, it takes the realm of imagination and a little bit of amusement from the muse, because the muse hangs out in the liminal. She hangs out in the in-between, or like we say at Intentional Creativity, she's dancing on the equal sign between energy and matter. She is the point of action, the thunderbolt, the causation, the pressing with her feet upon the equal sign, catalyzing, moving from energy to matter. As an artist, when you have a thought and you choose to write it, draw it, paint it, dance it, you are crossing the equal sign from thought, unform, to matter, form. You are causing that. But for most of our life, we're not aware of that, in the same way we're not aware that there's a whole pie and a baker and all the people eating and the table and everyone around us. There's this whole larger framework of experience which starts to come into view only when you surrender the grasp on your cherished beliefs, the thinking you know, the standing for something that you've held. What if today, in the presence of the muse, we could risk and begin to expand just a little bit into the unknown territory? But in order to do that, we have to make an agreement. And the agreement is that you will remain on this earth in your studio. And by the way, if you're in your office and you've been calling it an office, today's the day to change it to studio. You could just draw a sign, tape it on the door. It's a studio now. And you could just put the muse is in. That's very activating. So I need you to be able to be in your physical studio, ass in chair, consciousness with me, aware, so that you can remain grounded while at the same time travel. Do you think you can do that? Do you think you can do that? Because it's important that we hold both. Because sometimes we can get so caught up in the logic and the here now-ness and the assertion of our beliefs and our stands and our frameworks and our principles and our values and our ethics and just everything we think about how it is and how we think about ourselves, that we lose access to the mythical. We get hung up in the logical and we start to think that is what is so, but really we don't know. Can we just agree? Like, do you know? Like, do you know? No. Does anyone know? Do you know? Does anyone know? I am so clear, I don't know. I don't know, y'all. But I do know my muse. Only the part of her which she allows me to know. But she reminds me that for us to do the work, we need to remain in our studio and also traveling. But I also will warn you that we need to post a beware sign. We should have put it at the beginning of the cafe. Beware, or as some of you would tell me, be aware. Because when the muse comes, we just don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes it just stirs us up a little bit. So in order to prepare us to ground into this moment, I just invite you to allow a breath to come through. And without the like, okay, I'm taking a breath. Rather, just let that breath just come through you without pushing, without straining. Just finding your breath. And allowing that breath to just expand as if it's little sparkles through your whole body. Breath filling out the whole body. Local. And now, even if you've never tried it before, allow your breath to consciously expand into the field around you. Consciously allowing your breath to expand all around you as if there's little sparkles of breath in the whole field like an egg around you. This is non-local. So this is the body, this is local, this is where what Sue would call your cosmic address. And this is a non-local space, but it's local to your physical body. It's the field. And the field out here, this invisible part of you, is just as real as your physical body. So this idea about the muse hanging out in the liminal, I really think of it as a sacred idea. And by muse, I want to let you know what I mean by it. Can we do that? Can we just do a little brief introduction to what I mean by the muse? Muse is an ancient idea about inspiration. And the muse in different forms exists in many other cultures. The culture that the word muse comes from is the Greek culture, and they were externalized muses. Funny thing is, there was muses of all kinds of arts, but not painting. So I always act like the muse of painting is alive within us, that muse. And so by muse, I don't mean, though, an externalized entity, character, energy. I mean the part of you which exists physically and energetically that communicates with your whole self. It's a creative spark, a life force. It's a connection with voice. And you could think of the muse as a kind of access to the hidden world that we don't often gain access to unless we create. The muse comes through creating, and the muse is also very physical. It's a very somatic experience. The muse is not a thought process. It's connected with thought, but the muse is very much about this embodied being, this physical, gorgeous vessel. Just pat your body and just say, thank you, thank you, thank you, body. I know we have a hard relationship sometimes, but thank you for being here, for this relationship. And I just invite you to tune deeply into the space of your creative life force, wherever that feels like it exists within you. Just using your imagination to trace where that life force is, and to just put your hands where you feel that energy. I'm feeling like in my solar plexus belly area today. It's not literal, right? It's just a sensation, like where is that creative life force existing within you today? It moves around. Creative life force, all right. And from this space to just invite the self, the creative hidden self, which exists in that life force, letting them know that you are also inviting them to café. So you make the invitation consciously. Muse, will you come and have tea with us today? And you consciously make that invitation to your creative life force. There's choice here. And it's as if through that invitation, we are lit up with our musiness in our physical body as we start to become more and more present. So I invite you to become more and more present in this moment. How do you do that? Try it. How can you become more and more present in this moment with all of us here at our cafes around the world? What does more and more present feel like in your physical body? Taking a big, beautiful breath as more and more presence, just your own presence, fills up your body and your field. We've got breath, we've got presence, we've got an invitation to the muse. Wonderful. And now I'm going to invite you to get your piece of paper and a pen as you just take a moment to just write a little note and to decorate the edges like you would for a lover or your Valentine. A little note to the muse about this invitation. So we're across the cafe table from each other, and we get out our journals or our notebooks, and you're just writing a little invitation to the muse, like, join me for tea. So you've spoken it internally, and now you're writing it. So you're backing it up in form.
In intentional creativity, you begin with the spark, thought, or sensation. You shape that into an intention. Then you write it and draw it in form. Each level of intention amplifies the impact. If you then read it aloud, photograph and share it, it then amplifies other levels of intention. This awareness makes the entire experience more real, more sensual, and have a greater impact around your intention.
The muse is always there, but that invitation energy is essential. It's a little bit like a flirt energy, a little flirt. In café, we've spoken it, and now we're writing it and making it real. That's intentional creativity, is to take the idea, make it form, and infuse it with energy. That's intentional creativity. Wonderful. Just go ahead and sign it. You may sign it with your secret name or just however you choose to do the sign off. And this invitation is to consciously and groundedly engage with this idea of the muse. And again, the muse is your creative life force that's connected to your own soul voice. It's not something external for our purposes. It's something inherent and something that somehow is never broken, but is continually waiting for that invitation to come and play. And the next thing we're going to do is our first actual drawing, because today we're exploring the ideas that I'm sharing with you in drawing. You could think of today more like a romp with the muse as opposed to a class, because we're going to just be weaving through a series of experiences. Think of this as an experience. Don't worry about what you're going to get out of it or what the agenda is or how it's going to go. Like, just have an experience of tending your own creative life force, because that is such a gift. So we're going to do our first drawing, and this drawing is the seat of the muse. And so you're imagining that at your cafe, that somehow you have magically found yourself in this chair. And this is the seat of the muse, this chair that you've just positioned yourself in. I'll do a demonstration of drawing a chair. Now, the thing is, drawing a chair ain't so easy from a perspective place. So as mythical and magical and playful, you cannot get this wrong. In fact, the hope is that you won't try to get it right. Like, just, okay, for the rest of your time in drawing with me, don't try to get anything right. Don't try to draw anything anyone else would recognize or acknowledge. We're not here to make this look like the thing you see in your heart and mind. No, this is about the experience of drawing and what happens when you're drawing. So in intentional creativity, so I'm going to ask everyone to just pause and really listen to this one thing. While you're drawing, painting, dancing, anything you're doing in intentional creativity, the key to the highest access of flow and moving beyond the prefrontal cortex is bringing your awareness to the reality that while you're moving the pen, your body, the paintbrush, change is taking place. Something is happening. It's your observational awareness of the act of creation, which has things start to shift from the logical into the mythical. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the most important thing about intentional creativity is when you're moving the pen, when you're moving your body, when you're moving the paintbrush, when you're moving the shovel, when you're preparing the food, that you bring your observation or your muse eyes to what you're making. You're paying attention to the making. You're not just making. So there's the thought, there's the making, and then there's the thinking about the making. It's called metacognition, thinking about thinking. And in intentional creativity, we're being metacognitive about whatever the creative process is. And so what happens from a neurological perspective is you start to expand in potential access in your brain. And the muse is there to accommodate that. And we know that the universe is made in an observational way, that when we witness something, it changes. So as you witness, so it's witnessing every part of the creative process. It's witnessing your hand as you move the pen. That's the witnessing. Watching the line emerge, not dominating, letting the flow through you. This is intentional creativity, and the intention is the intention to watch it, but it's also infusing it with a specific intention. So right now, we're going to draw the seat of our muse as a continued invitation space. But as you're drawing it, it's almost like that presence of the muse is coming more and more and more into form. So as you move the pen, it's all happening. Now, to get the greatest result from this, you can't dominate the pen. If you dominate the pen, and even if you know how to draw a chair, and you try to draw the chair the way you think you want, it won't work the same way because your brain is accessing a different filing system. So we're going for a part of the brain and the creative process which is not unknown. You haven't been there before. Now the brain will access what it knows about chair a little bit, but we're not drawing a specific chair that you've seen. We're not trying to duplicate something that exists in logical reality. Duplication of objects in art doesn't create the same result. And we're going for a kind of an experience. We're not going for duplication of something that exists. We're going for an experience that happens and the feeling that you have while you allow your consciousness to expand into places where it's not hanging out if you're only being literal, logical, and asserting what you know and referencing what you know. And isn't it awesome that from the neuroplasticity of the brain that is designed to leap into the future where you're putting your attention? Don't you think that's awesome? That we're not just, it's not a limited palette. Your consciousness is continually making itself available to you given the actions that you give it to work with. And intention is like the amplification of those motions. We're not just drawing a chair, we're drawing the seat of the muse and giving this level of attention to this place within ourselves which is hungering for our attention. And as you're drawing it, it's happening in real time. And you're watching it, and you're feeling it, and you're being with it, and you're changing in the moment. And flow starts to happen through your entire system. And it's healing. It's healing to go into these expanded spaces. So I'm going to demonstrate a musey chair, and I'm going to do exactly what I'm asking you to do, and then we'll put on some music and ask you to do it. So, well, I've never even done this before. See? Because because in intentional creativity, it's like real time risk. And so my intention is I am drawing the seat of the muse, and as I'm drawing it, I'm paying attention to my pen. And as that's happening, the muse is coming more and more into my life, out of the unknown only and into the known. So I'm going to take a big breath, and I'm going to bring my pen, and I'm not going to lift my pen unless I forget. And then I breathe, and then I name it. Mine wants to be called the hot heart. You just don't question those things. You just do what it says. Okay, so we're gonna start with, you just can't make this step up. The hot hearts was the name of my my first club when I was in 6th grade. So I don't know why that's here, but there it is, the hot heart seat. So you're gonna draw the seat of your muse. I think you've got the instruction. You can't get it wrong. We're gonna turn on a little bit of tunes, and off you go, and you're just going to let the seed emerge and then name it and then document it and share it with us. So this is what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes. Enjoy. Oh, I love it. Oh, it just feels endearing. It feels so precious. Oh, they're beautiful. What a wonderful invitation. What a wonderful invitation. And now you have this imaginary seat of the muse. And when you create in any form, it's as if you have this chair with you and you have created this seat of power, the seat of attention. And each time you connect with your muse, it's like this return to a really core and centered place that's really different than a lot of the ways we actually think and engage with our identity. A relationship with the muse will continue to develop and inform your identity over many, many years. And one of our hopes in our entire community of Musea is that the women and whoever their lovers and children and family that are with them would hear their own voice, that you could hear your voice above the other voices externally and also sometimes internally, that you start to recognize. And when you start to recognize the truest voice within you, the voice of the critic or the voices that taunt or the voices that have been cruel, they start to change. It's a continuum. It's a spectrum. You might think of the critic and the muse as a kind of duality. You might think of them as opposite ends of a spectrum of a voice. But what happens when you come back together? What happens when the voice which has been critical and largely a voice which has been absent but often shows up as a request to be more wild than you're being, and you moderating yourself? It's like, I really want to wear the leopard nightgown, but I'm getting the pink flannel. I really want to be on top, but I'll be on bottom again. I really want the cake, but I'm going to get the bran muffin. The really want, the crave, the hunger, the desire often shows up as this like fierce little fuse. It's like it throws a spark. And you're like, hey, be quiet. We can't let them know about us. And so there's a lot of sheltering of this wildest part of ourselves because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't. I'll just say you don't know what's going to happen when the muse comes to sit with you. And so we quiet it. And then there's the critic who's like, well, you're never going to be good at that anyway. Who do you think you are hanging out with these creative people? Who are you to be a part of this? Like, come on. Remember that? You failed art 6th grade. Like, whatever. Your mom was the artist. Like, whatever all those little dialogues are that happen. So we have this really interesting straddling of a threshold of inner voice. And if there's one thing that matters the most to me in my whole life, it's access to that voice within myself and within the people around me. Because I actually can't trust people who aren't listening to their voice. Because I don't know what they're listening to. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what they've taken on or how culture or society or religion or parents or beliefs have shaped this. When you start to truly listen to this other way, which is a combination in the spectrum between the critic and the muse, it's really different and you get really different information. And it's not just like a knowing, like an intuition, like I just know. It's not really like a gnosis. It's really like we're aware that we don't know. It's really like a kind of instant humility of like, wow. It's really like, whoa, okay then, here I am. Like I'm in here. And I remember the day before I was in here. I remember what I was doing the day before I came into myself. And I had already been creating for a long time, and I already had lots of creative family members. I was raised by wild, wild women. They were feminists and separatists and activists and all colors and all sizes and all textures and all beliefs. Everybody was themselves before they started fighting about what self you could be or not. That was a big moment for me as a child to watch the division when we were together. It was painful. And I think I spent my whole life trying to be like, okay, let's come back together now. We're all at the table again. And as long as no one asserts any kind of supremacy over another, we can actually sit here and be an unknowing. And so this place of the muse is a healing of a seeming kind of paradox, a seeming kind of separation and duality in our awareness of a coming together. And when the critic and the muse come together, you have fierce discernment, which we need. And then you have absolute, unbridled playfulness, craving, desire, and possibility. And we can't let either one lead entirely. They need to come together. That's the straddle part. It's like one foot in both worlds. I've got one foot in my fierce wisdom and logic and the known of how the critic has been operating. And then I've got one foot in the mystery and the mythical of the unknown. And between them both, because they are both on the spectrum of potential, I'm writing the equal sign. That's the middle. That's the middle between energy and matter, is that place of motion. And you are initiating it through your intention to act, to cause, to create.